One of the loneliest places to be is in the middle of a relationship with a covert narcissist or some type of narc, or recovering from one, especially if you try to build a family with them, because no matter what, you're always tied to them somehow. It truly does break you in half if you are not doing the work. And even if you are, it's just like this wound that never stops hurting. And yet over time, I've seen that there is a power in knowledge and growth and healing that comes from understanding how it all happened to you, how your childhood played a role, what happened that you didn't see. And that is never more true than when we talk about covert narcissistic abuse. It feels like invisible abuse when it's happening to you. And I believe that we are wired and trained for it because of our childhoods in so many cases. I think so much about the series and how to define things, and I realize that as I'm doing my meditations and hanging out with my animals and getting distracted sometimes, that we need to really talk about what defines this kind of abuse. And then we're going to keep talking about how all of this really connects to our stories and our lives and hopefully to our healing. So I'm glad you're here. Let's get into it and talk about defining narcissistic abuse. Hi, I am Dr. Kim Sage. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. What is narcissistic abuse? And how do we differentiate it from other types of psychological abuse and wounding? And how do we make sense of the wide and vast spectrum of overt, the kind of abuse that everybody would say on a movie screen, yeah, that's bad, to the very nuanced, low-key, insidious types of abuse, more covert types of abuse that so many of us have experienced. I fully believe with all my heart that so many of us, because I've seen it in my practice and I know it in my own story, we don't just inadvertently choose narcissists. Everybody I've ever worked with has had some kind of childhood complex trauma story with a parent, generally speaking, that set them up to be seeking something very different than the narcissist they chose. Today's video will be about partner narcissistic abuse, but we are going to get into parental narcissistic abuse, and we're going to talk a lot about how toxic childhoods and CPTSD childhoods often set us up for a CPTSD, a complex trauma, a complex post-traumatic stress disorder relationship with a partner that is often abusive from a narcissistic perspective. When I was about 12 years old, my father, I was visiting him for the weekend with my stepmother, who I adored, and my father, who struggled with severe trauma and narcissistic rage and a lot of things, was prone to being very conditional and angry about things. And he could be the greatest guy in the room if you didn't live with him. Anyway, we were making tacos, my stepmother and I, who actually taught me how to cook and bake, who I just, like I said, truly adored. And she was chopping up the taco meat. And whenever I make tacos or ground beef or ground turkey, 9 times out of 10, even though I hate that this happens, this memory still emerges. My dad decided that the ground beef was not chopped up small enough, and he refused to eat the tacos, made a sandwich, got mad, stormed off, and that kind of thing happened a lot. Now, my mom, who I've talked about, who had a much more confusing pattern, and I truly believe this is the case for so many people, I believe had a lot more of the more untreated borderline dynamics. And so the combination of those two humans in my childhood, why is someone calling me right now? Just a minute. Of course, always when you're filming, right? Now, my mom, who had much more nuanced behaviors, I do believe also contributed to why I set myself up to choose and engage in a narcissistic relationship that I had really no idea about. But that's for another day, another story. But what I want to share with you is that these little experiences that we can have in childhood can really set us up Because in comparison, we might choose a narcissist who doesn't have those overt, I refuse to eat the taco meat behaviors, but has just as many, if not more, detrimental and wounding behaviors that we don't recognize, because in comparison, it seems so much better. So we're going to really talk today about the more covert types of narcissistic abuse. But I want to start with saying that in the more classic sense, what really differentiates narcissistic abuse from emotional or psychological abuse is this intentional, controlling, manipulative power and control grab that is happening from the narcissist. And with no intent to change, no real empathy, and with an intentionality on their behalf, on some level, to really wound you and gain control and take from you to give their own emptiness and shamefulness and lack of awareness, oftentimes, of that core brokenness inside, to give it some sense of value and purpose and supply, really. That's the idea, that you're feeding their emptiness and their brokenness, their shamefulness in some way. So they have to take from you to get that. So in a quick word, to just summarize, let's just say a quick sentence, more overt abuse would be, violence. It would be all the things, like I said, that you might see on a screen and say, yeah, that's bad. That would be, rage and verbal insults and name calling and, forcing some type of emotional or financial or physical isolation, invasions of privacy, reading your cell phone messages, like all of the things that are overt that you would say, yeah, that is bad. That's abusive. Financial abuse, like I'm saying, any of that. So we can talk more in another video about those, but I think that those are more clear, though those are just as damaging, and they can be very present in narcissistic relationships. They can often start out very overt and start out very covert, I should say, and move towards the overt, these types of things. So we can see all of these things in narcissistic abuse. But where we don't see it, I think, in the beginning and over time, is the covert type of abuse. And so that's what we're going to get into today. This video is going to be a little bit longer, but what I want you to keep in mind is that all of this is driven by this conditionality, this entitlement, this control, and it is oftentimes packaged in a way that you don't see. So this could be things like belittling, sarcasm, little kind of like jabs of criticism or feedback, as in, this was really good, but this, so it's always followed by a but. You got an A, but you could have gotten an A plus. They might interrupt you, make demands. There's just these undermining ways of engaging with you. Now, of course, there's going to be a manipulation, but the manipulation might be a manipulation of your emotions, trying to get you to feel bad for them, to feel guilty, flipping a situation where it's like you thought you were in the right, and now you leave the conversation apologizing to them and promising to work on it more. It really is this sort of thing that you don't recognize. And so that might look like, another example would be incongruent behavior, where the words and actions don't match. And within that, they might make false promises, like, I promise you I'm going to change, because they're giving you something to get you to stay. They don't necessarily mean it, but they're using it intentionally to get you to not leave them. Because the truth is, many of them want to be in a relationship, right? It's not like they're on that sociopathic intent to completely harm, but it is because of whatever's happening inside of them that their behavior is resulting in this. And so you might have false apologies, false promises, and things of that nature. But at the end of the day, no matter what they're telling you, it doesn't match their behavior. You might find they have a pattern of emotional blackmail where they punish you. It's often called fog. You feel fear, obligation, and guilt. And they're really good at trying to intimidate you or get you to somehow feel those feelings of fear and guilt so that you will give them whatever it is they want. Of course, we talk a lot about gaslighting. This is an intentional way of making you feel crazy, honestly. At the end of the day, it's like they are truly making you feel like whatever you feel, whatever you think, whatever you said or didn't say, that somehow that didn't happen, that you question yourself. It really is a crazy making. It's an intentional twisting of the reality in some way to benefit them and to get you to fall in line. They can often be competitive, and they can, try to sort of low-key, whether it's cheating even in a board game, or trying to one-up you in some sense, or just do a little bit better than you did. It's this threat that they have of you being better than them. So we might see them also deny things that happened to you, and that kind of goes back with that gaslighting, right? Or deny what they said or did to the point where they're so good and masterful you believe them. They certainly can lie and be very deceptive, whether it's affairs. I would say a large majority of people that are narcissistic are cheating, period. If you look at the stats for cheating in general, and you think about the entitlement of a narcissist, it is just such a pathway. I can't tell you how many patients I have that I've known over the years. It's very clear to me that their partner has some form of narcissism, and the partner travels a lot, is successful, and oftentimes the patient it'll never occur to them that the partner could be cheating, ever. And I will say that the same thing happened to me. I was like, well, at least they didn't cheat on me, because there was this moral presentation of how good they were. And come to find out, in retrospect, years later, of course it was going on the whole time, they continued to cheat on other partners afterwards. Like, it's this thing, though, where you buy into them so much because they present this image. And remember, like I said with my story in the beginning, you're trying to heal from some version of that you often don't see these things. They definitely can trivialize and demean you and make you feel stupid and small through little comments or behaviors. They love to use your own fears of or feelings of shame to coerce you, to guilt you into, giving them intimacy when you don't want to, because that would mean you're a bad partner. Or they'll spin it around where you're denying them something. And so then you think, well, maybe, God, maybe it is me. Maybe I do have this childhood thing that got in the way, and I need to work on that, and discuss it with my therapist. I mean, it's just insane. They will use the silent treatment, which is, a very punishing way of engaging. They have an endless victim syndrome. And so at the bottom line, no matter what is happening, it is never their fault. Now, they can pretend to own their behavior in a more cognitive way, where they kind of give you that cognitive empathy, where it's like, oh, yes, I see that you're struggling, or I can work on that. But at the end of the day, they never change. They don't own their behavior. And where this gets really bad from the beginning is as the relationship progresses, as they detach from you, or if you leave them. I want to say that all of these things get so much worse, especially if you leave them. You will pay for that for the rest of your life in some way, I promise you. If it's an ex, if it's through child support or alimony, or not getting it, or taking the kids. I've seen cases where narcissists had no involvement with the kids, and they will take 50-50 custody just to punish the partner, or they will take, they will only offer, 10% custody and not take that, but only screw you when you really needed the time off or whatever, like you have a trip plan. At the end of the day, though, they never own their behavior. They are endless victims, and as a result of that, they will pull in other people to get sympathy, to align with them. They'll create this sort of the flying monkey dynamic, where they pull others into the story, and everybody aligns against you because they're the victim, right? You're the bad one. That's the whole thing. They're projecting that you are the bad object and they are the good object, and so everything is about you being the bad object. They will hoover you, which is basically like trying to pull you back in. They will stalk you. They will try to love bomb you, right? All of that happens in a way that is meant to pull you back in, only to discard you and control, manipulate you later. They can have fake ownership and, like I said, fake apologies and authentic stuff where they will say they'll work on it. And then them giving you that makes you think that, okay, so they're going to work on it, and we're going to get better. And that happens again and again and again and again until you realize it's not going to get better. They definitely can have this technique of negative contrasting. So they make these comparisons between you and others. In a way, the goal is to make you feel less than. They can be definitely, and this gets worse, especially as you end the relationship or leave them, really engage in smear campaigns against you. And they will, and like I said, enlist others. They will mock you and make fun of your success. They might jokingly in their relationship kind of like poke fun and like, try to be cute, but what they're really doing is trying to lower your sense of self. They certainly can be exploitive and objectify you for their own benefit. As I said before, they will tell big lies, they will tell white lies, whatever it takes to sort of keep that sense of self in their own way intact and to minimize you. And then, like I'm saying later, if they are intending to punish you because of something that you did, like leave them or not respond to them or whatever. They can definitely withhold things like money, intimacy, communication, and nothing a narcissist loves more. This is why family court is such a nightmare for high functioning people, and narcissists often are. I believe family court does not understand this, is they will use money to punish you, and money is a huge trigger. Because if you look at the divorce rate for most people, oftentimes the person who I believe chose the narcissist, we've looked at, they're often empathic, caregivers, they were nurturers, they were doing the job at home or whatever it was, or they've given up their own career or their identity, and so they have a lot more to lose. The narcissists tend to go off and continue to find partners right away. They don't like to be alone and create their own little world of success while you're struggling, and so money is a great way to punish you. They will neglect you, they will neglect the children, they will definitely not be involved in things that they don't really care about with the kids, only if they do. They will invade your privacy, whether it's, like I said, in a more overt way or low-key way. They will assassinate your character, slander you. This is once you leave them or when the relationship's over or there's some way you're out. Of course, it can happen in the relationship in a more overt way too. They will try to isolate you. This often happens. This is kind of how they do it too. They will really isolate you in some way where you start to buy into their world. And so you've let go of this relationship, or because it takes so much to be with a narcissist, you've had to let go of things that you cared about. Hobbies, friends, connection, family, your job, whatever it is. And so all of this acts on a spectrum, right? It might start out, it always starts out, even if it goes very quickly from love bombing to abusive to overt abuse, which is also very common in the cycle of abuse. And we'll talk more about just the cycle of abuse, our childhoods, and how that keeps us stuck in the relationships. Because I believe we've already been trained to be in the cycle of abuse with our own parents. Going back to that story, right? You learn to just like, well, this person also loves me, and this is just how things are. And or so you have the overt abuse, or all the way down to the more covert kind. And then it will go back up to overt if the relationship ends, or you might have intermittent overt behaviors. But the bottom line is that all of this is meant to just pummel you and who you are so that they can punish you, hurt you, control you, manipulate you, get some sense of self from you, the kids, whatever it takes. And so I really wanted to explain it because I think that this word gets so kind of overused, but I think that if you have been in this relationship, you know what I'm talking about. Or if you were in it right now. I think the hardest thing is for people who aren't quite to the place where they realize they're in it. And so these kind of videos, I think, where you say, okay, peel away all the stuff that seems like overtly bad and start to ask yourself, where do you just feel less than? What interactions? What do they say to you? What do they do? Being in a situation with a narcissist is one of the most lonely places to be. And I think this is one of the biggest hallmarks, assuming they have other, characteristics of narcissistic behavior, covert, overt, and all those other types in between, communal, internalizing, externalizing, malignant. Of course, that's an extreme form that would really align more with the more overt abuse. But the truth is that it's an insidious form of stealing your soul and breaking your spirit. And that is what I think happens, is that you become truly just so broken down. And that is why it is one of the hardest things to do, which is to end these relationships, to stay gone, and to survive and thrive and heal afterwards. And because I believe that all of that happens and creates complex PTSD all over the map, you are already holding complex trauma from your childhood for so many of us. We are still trying to heal from the wounds of that childhood, and that is why we chose them in the first place. And that is what makes it so horrific to heal from. But that's my goal, is for us to talk about toxic childhoods and toxic people and what to do. So of course we're going to get into in later videos what to do to heal. There are so many great resources For a long time, I've hesitated to talk about my own experiences outside of the parenting part for so many reasons. And I want to be mindful and respectful of my own family story, but I think it's really important to talk about how so many of us, I had a master's degree in psychology and didn't understand my childhood at that point, didn't understand how it affected my choices. All this stuff on attachment and trauma healing, it was really not on the conversation table in a lot of therapies. Unless you were doing psychoanalysis, you weren't really getting into that. You were focusing on the surface and how to think about things and fix things, but you weren't doing a deep dive. And so that's really my goal. So thanks for being here. If you like this video, please check out my links down below for courses. There's a free course with a free checklist on identifying, could you have narcissistic or borderline parents who were untreated, or emotionally wounding parents, and then a flagship course on how to heal that, and a course on healing your inner child and your inner parent. So if you found this helpful, please check those out. I'd also love for you to subscribe and join this little growing community if you'd like to do so. So please consider that, and know that I wish you well, and I will see you soon. Have a beautiful rest of the day. Take care. Bye.